Here on the best series on the internet named Saucy Subclasses, I talk about subclasses, and I've made it a goal of mine to do like one subclass for each class, and then do it all again, and again, and again, until either I get bored doing this series, or I do every single subclass, which physically won't be able to happen because I record one of these every 3 weeks. So by the time I'm maybe finished with, like, I don't know, the Player's Handbook ones, oh look, there's 4 more books out now. I won't be able to keep up to date with all the new stuff, but I will certainly try and talk about a lot of the new stuff more than the old stuff. However, the old stuff is great as well, and this is what we're here to talk about today. Sorcerers! Like, Rangers have had a resurgence in the last year, at least with my groups, of them considering them, you know, much more viable forces. But sorcerers haven't really gotten as much love. Tasha's certainly innovated on sorcerer subclasses and gave them a lot more to do. Having just extra spells already always prepared is, you know, bloody brilliant. So yeah, I'm quite glad with the new changes. However, we're going to go old school and go back to, God, like 2015, 16, 14. One of those years where D&D 5th edition was created and the Player's Handbook was slapped on the table. And the sorcerer ones were Wild Magic, which is the good one, and the other one, which is Draconic Ancestry, or Draconic Bloodline, even. I honestly just call it the dragon one most of the time, so I forget the names, like, of this subclass a lot. I think that this is a cool subclass, gives you a lot of dragon-like features, as you would expect. It lets you hone in on a specific element, use that well. You get some cool features that make you a dragon person. That's probably the best way I could explain it. I have always felt like the sorcerer subclasses lacked substance. Xanathar's kind of started getting on the right track with storm sorcery, and I think Storm Sorcery is a good example of that because of the way that they can kind of use lightning and thunder and just be an absolute frickin' boss. It didn't improve too much on the core system though. It didn't allow the Sorcerer to do much more than what they were initially, you know, supposed to do. They built the Sorcerer to be a big blast class where they just do big AoE and single target damage. That's kind of what the purpose of them is, and a lot of their spells serve that. I think that Draconic Bloodline really hones into the, you know, big blaster spellcaster, because that's what it's made for. You do extra damage and stuff like that. It lets you live longer and do more stuff so that you can save your spell slots to do more spells. The simple idea of this subclass is that they're associated with some sort of dragon. If you're playing a Draconic Bloodline character, that can mean a multitude of things that might have happened in the past. 1,000 years ago, your dad poked a dragon, and there you go. It could also be something to do with, like, a dragon might have created you, might have polymorphed you out of just nothing, and, like, now you're a thing. Just stuff like that. Being a Dragonborn as well is just a great reason to be a Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer. It makes sense that they're a dragon. Basically, you have Dragon's Blood, which is metal as hell and one of the coolest sentences. So, at first level, you get 2 features. They're alright. The first one is pick a colour! You can choose any sort of dragon colour / material to base your Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer on. This is all of them, not just with most other things where you pick a dragon and it's normally a chromatic. You can choose metallic in these ones, and it's pretty cool. Each of them have a type associated with them, which we'll get into later. If you want to learn more about that, check out the subclass on anything that the subclass is on. It will give you a big list. I don't really want to go over all that now. It's going to bore the hell out of you. You kind of get what it means. You know, like, if you pick White Dragon, then it's cold, etc., etc. In addition, you get to speak Draconic and have advantage on charisma checks on dragons. It's conditional, but I kind of like it. It's obviously very heavily themed, which is good, because that's how it should be. And yeah, speaking Draconic is something that people just choose anyway. When you're a new player, you look at all the languages, and you see Draconic, and you're like, oh, this game's called Dungeons and Dragons, let's just write this down real quick, you know, that sort of thing. The other feature is Draconic Resilience, which you get at level 1. So you get, basically, you're a Hill Dwarf, where you get an extra hit point every level. so that you can be a tanky sorcerer. Gives you extra hit points to work with. Most sorcerers will have decent constitution, which again plays into the whole thing of you can stay alive better to shoot things faster. You have proficiency in con saves, which is, I think, the only spellcaster that does that, the only primary spellcaster, and it fits. You want your spells to work, and by late game it's going to be very hard to break your concentration. Even mid-game, you're secure on that front. And having those extra hit points can just really serve towards... Like, your sorcerer is going to have probably more hit points than the cleric and the rogue. And that's cool, even though they only have a d6. They also get, you know, the dragon scales thing, where now they basically have permanent mage armor that you can't get rid of. It's 13 plus dexterity. That's your base armor. Investing in dexterity is something good with most spellcasters, because then you get more AC, which is important, especially when you're like a wizard that is stereotyped to not have great AC, but shield and mage armor together is a lethal combo, especially with good dexterity to put on top of that. I think this feature is great for the start. When you start hitting like 7th or 8th level, having that extra 1 hit point and that slightly better AC than average isn't really going to help you out in the long run. You're going to end up lagging behind in a lot of those aspects. As a sorcerer, that shouldn't matter too much depending on your build, because normally sorcerers stay at the back. The Tasha's new improvements did allow for them to kind of take a load of the Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade cantrips, just in case they wanted to start doing that. But other than that, you're going to be pretty far back, not taking as much damage as maybe the Fighter, the Barbarian, the Paladin, something. And yeah, having extra cool AC is kind of good for the start, because then things are going to miss you more. But when you get to level 7 or 8 or 9, things are going to have a plus 11 to plus 8 to hit on average, maybe, depending on if you're like just being swarmed by a bunch of little guys. And yeah, that's going to be hard to justify having just slightly better AC with to deal with that problem. It is a great start for a first level sorcerer though. It can definitely make you feel very powerful having like a permanent on average 14 to 16 AC and extra hit points on top of that. Pretty neat. So at level 6 you get elemental affinity. This is where what dragon you picked starts actually mattering, which is 5 levels later than the first one. It's weird to me, but fine. It works. So when you deal damage with a spell whose type matches your draconic ancestry, you deal more damage. Like, if you're from a fire dragon and you cast Fireball, you get more damage on the Fireball. It's your charisma modifier to 1 roll of the damage on that attack, which is really well paired if you, like, maybe quicken spell a fireball and then shoot a firebolt, that sort of thing. Because you also get to add your charisma modifier to the firebolt as well, I think. I'm not sure. My notes here don't tell me, but I think that this is a pretty decent ability, but it kind of falls off quickly, because normally you're not going to get a charisma over +5. Sure, that's a good charisma, and that will definitely contribute to maybe having a few clutch moments where that extra bit of damage is the thing that tips the scale. But other than that, lacking. In addition to the extra damage, you also get resistant to the damage type, but you need to spend a sorcery point, which 1 point at level 6 is fine. I think that that's an okay investment, but why does it need to cost a sorcery point when you can pick a race that gets a resistance for free? It strikes me as a little bad. It could definitely be more useful in the late game when you just spend a single sorcery point and boom, resistance to a damage. That's great, because you're going to have like a lot more sorcery points, and sometimes sorcerers don't know what to do with them. Because, yeah, sorcery points are great. Great mechanic. In elements of mechanics, so far, this subclass is definitely seeming lacking to me, but we'll see what happens as we go further along. And then we get to 14th level. There's 8 levels between the class, which is fine, because it's a primary spellcaster. But still, that's big. 14th level ability is fun. It basically gives you a flying speed equal to your movement speed. That's great. I love it. I love it so much. Having a flying speed as, you know, a draconic sorcerer. That makes a lot of sense, and it's really cool. It's equivalent to your movement speed as well, and it didn't really say anything to do with, like... It didn't restrict it to your base one. It's like your current movement speed, which means you could put, like... Or us to have, like, Long Strider on yourself, or give yourself haste, and boom, that applies to speed as well, stuff like that. It's really cool to me. I like that idea. There's a few rules as well surrounding, like, you can't wear armor. That's fine, you're a sorcerer. Most of the time you're not going to be wearing armor. However, it also, like, rips the back of your clothes. It very specifically says that, and it's like, sure, I could infer that from context. You didn't need to write that in the book. They were probably just trying to find space or something and add extra rules just to make things, you know. Because this would have been a real short feature and a real lacking-looking one if they didn't add a few extra lines of text on how it works. So I don't blame them. Flight speed is very fun in general, and it can also be extremely helpful for a lot of situations. Just being able to zip around in the air, immediately all the flippin' foot soldiers have got to use their, like, bows. Which most little minion guys have, like, a ranged weapon, but they're most likely not as good with it in comparison to their melee. Not only that, it forces enemies to play around you in comparison to you having to play around flying, like, enemies in general. Flying sorcerer against another flying enemy sounds amazing, and I want to see it. So, the level 18 ability is very interesting. I can't really tell if it's good or not. I genuinely can't. I'd need to test it, but I don't know when I would. Good ability, maybe not for level 18. Its flavor is basically Frightful Presence, where if you're not really sure how dragons work, they have an extra action that they can use on their multi-attack, where they scare the shit out of everyone that can see them as an action, basically. And if they succeed on the save, they're immune to the whole effect forever. Or for 24 hours, but that's basically forever. So with 5 sorcery points, which is a big investment, you can use your action to make an aura 60 foot around you. Pretty big, and I appreciate that. You gotta concentrate on it, which makes this feature a little worse, and it lasts a minute, so it's like basically a one encounter sort of thing. Enemies in the aura need to make a wisdom saving throw or get charmed or frightened, depending on what you picked when you first did it. That's really interesting to me. You could have a frightful presence, but you could also have a charming presence. Which makes sense. You could be like a metallic dragon sorcerer that really just wants everyone to love each other. And yeah, that's what comes out of it. Everyone likes you. If you succeed on the saving throw on this ability, the creature is, like, immune to it. They can't be affected by it again. And I think that the interesting thing is that once you fail the save, that's it for a minute. You are frightened or charmed, unless, like, the sorcerer's concentration is broken, which is hard to flippin' do. Because if they're at level 18, they're going to have at least a +7 or 8 to their constitution saving throws. And hopefully war magic, if they manage to get that. But yeah, good-ass feature. Really good, in my opinion. So, only 5 sorcery points, which is, you know, great. It's an investment for sure, but it's a good one in my opinion. I think that the status effects get really easy to resist. There's obviously the factor of legendary resistances, but frightened and charmed are the 2 most popular conditions apart from poisoned, and most things are going to be good at saving against those in the late game, which is cool. I think it could it's a risk of an ability, but if it works, whoo, that's good. I think that taking the action to do it is costly, but I'm not complaining much about that. You'd use this, and then you can use the rest of your actions to Fireball, or Vitriolic Sphere, or Lightning Bolt, or whatever else that you sorcerers do. And as long as they're in concentration, you can have a massive party. I don't really know what to say about this entire thing in general. I think it starts really picking up in the late game, but other features begin to drop. Which is kind of how a subclass should be built, in my opinion. The starting ones should maybe decline in quality as you go along, but the late game ones are sudden, oh my god, I'm the most powerful people in the world sort of thing. There are some subclasses that can just stay from level 3 to 20 bloody brilliant, and yeah, I like those more. But this game design is cool as well. As a sorcerer, you're going to have plenty other things to fill the gaps in comparison to maybe a fighter or a bloody monk where their features are their everything, basically. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully I've managed to convince some people that Draconic Bloodline isn't as basic as most people think. That's the general consensus I've seen on the internet. If you want to see more, do the like, do the comment, do the subscribe. If you don't, then I'm probably gonna have to kill you. Probably. I can't guarantee your safety is the point. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one. Go away! I gotta end the recording.